if you looked, you would find that certain things like for instance, how my my White Star submarines, which there's pictures of them in Panama. There's white tanks behind them, and then there's this sub pin that has white submarines there, and it says museum something or other, private submarine rental, and basically people could rent my White Star submarines and go for cruises. They couldn't have torpedoes though; they were torpedoless. Um, a torpedo also used to be a dick, by the way. They used to also call men's penises torpedoes. It was something that some of the kings and JFK did. Anyway, the things that fall underneath National Security Act was basically stuff like how that was a sub rental, and how the Republicans couldn't even pay for the fuel, and they actually sucked the fuel out of two of the submarines, so one of the submarines could actually have fuel, because they couldn't afford to have fuel because they weren't really rich or anything, and the subs rented for about $90 a day or $900 a day or something like that, or $1,000 a day. They were very expensive subs because they sucked a lot of fuel and, required a full crew to basically crew them. So not many people were actually rented. A lot of rich people actually did rent them. But basically in their off hour, pretty much they got taken over by a bunch of people who were actually poor. Anyway, though, so they sucked the fuel out of three of the submarines, so one of the submarines could actually have fuel, and they could start a war. They were basically pirating, and pretty much basically someone like John McCain, shoot him in the back, John McCain, and like JFK and some of the other ones. What they would do is they would sneak onto the little islands where the Japanese and Chinese were working, or where the British were working, and they would sneak on in there, and they would go and rape girls, and sometimes kill them. And they go, and they would pretend to be Chinese Aborigines or something like that. But China never had Aborigines, or they didn't do that. Anyway, it's a really sick thing. Sometimes they would maybe smear shit on themselves. I don't really know. And they would basically go and rape women. I guess to cover up their smell. I don't know. I don't really know what their deal was. But basically, they would do commando raids, and a commando was basically a man in no clothes. Commando raids were naked raids, pretty much. They used to call them naked raids actually back then, but basically they wouldn't wear any clothes, or they would wear just a red Speedo. John McCain came out with his Speedos a while later, where he was just like a thong, basically. And John McCain actually tried to walk into the Washington, D.C. building wearing nothing but a Speedo. And I was like, no, you're going to get out of here. That's not acceptable in my building. And basically they were rapists, and they were raping women, Chinese women and German women and French women and even English women. And they raped on all those things when they talked about, oh, we protected this or we did that. Basically, pretty much they were taking my White Star submarines, and they were running around selling drugs, selling cocaine, and pretty much raiding ships, and also they used the one carrier to find out where the other two smaller carriers were, because we were searching for those submarines, and they're white submarines. They tried spray painting the side of the submarines, but the paint was a polyurethane epoxy paint, and basically it flaked off. And one of them had all the signatures of the volunteers that helped out on the submarine, on the side of the submarine, because everybody had shined up the submarine, because it was like a war museum and like a sub museum, and basically a lot of the old timers had gone in there and volunteered their times because the Republicans, because the people, they couldn't afford the parts. So I was going to rent them out, basically. I could afford it, so I did pay the bill. I paid the bill, basically, and paid for the submarines. Of course, they were embezzling a lot of money. But anyway, a bunch of volunteers wanted to do it anyway because they had invented the submarine and basically the seals, and we were replacing all the seals on all the subs. So it was going to be like a little museum that the old timers could run around in and stuff like that. So young John McCain basically would get in his little Speedo, and they would take out one of the submarine, and they would go run cocaine and run opium, and they would go and sneak onto the shores and rape women. and they pretended to be a 4-star general, and they went and they actually encountered a real 4-star general that happened to be working on a generator in China. China, in China, you don't, even if you're a 4-star general, you would, they still work on generators and they still do all kinds of stuff. So there's like this war hero, 4-star general, Chinese guy, and he was working on a generator, fixing it and stuff. And one of the guys, I think his name was, I forget, one of the guys, and they were getting some cocaine, buying some cocaine from him, or some opium from this guy. And 2,000 workers are up on the mountain working, and they go to shoot. John McCain or somebody pulls out his gun to shoot this 4-star general, and I think maybe even squeezes off a round. And every Chinese person looked up and looked at them, and because the people in the sub rental, they were pretending to be on the mission from the president or something, and they had a fake 4-star general staff, and they thought that would just get them by. But the Chinese general, who really was a 4-star general of China, just wasn't in his uniform because he didn't want to get it dirty, was talking to them, and he was like, "Well, let me see your papers, blah blah blah." So they got like, "We don't need papers." They pull out a gun, and they're going to shoot him, and they actually do shoot him. And the whole mountain turns on them and goes down to them. And we find out about how they're doing this stuff. Anyway, they also blew up a ferry with 6,000 Chinese people on board, trying to get China or Japan to what's called 4,000 Chinese children or Japanese children were on a field trip, and they blew it up to try and get the Chinese to attack America or the United States or someone, to make it look like it was Japanese and Chinese. And they talk about how they don't know where the torpedo went, and they don't know where the thing went. But that was my sub rental, and that was my submarine, and they were supposed to be testing out things and supposed to be shooting at a blank target. They knew that sub would miss the target and they set up. They must have rigged it, and they wanted to destroy that ferry. They were trying to start the war. John McCain and JFK and a bunch of other people. Anyway, they're trying to lie. They're trying to do a lot of horrible things, and they got the prince probably involved in it, or the son of the whatever, of the because he was fingered in some. I mean, he was involved in. He used one of the royal ships, which was my ship. He was supposed to be practicing and stuff, and they're raiding factories and warehouses, and then they would shoot everyone in the whole town. So the what's called the Prince of England, basically, or he was pretty much. They're using it. They're using one of my ships to raid factories and stuff, and then trying to say that I ordered it or something like that. I don't really know. They're just stealing. It was JFK, and he stole one of my boats, and they intended to kill me or something anyway. Anyway, though, but it's just one planet. They thought eventually they thought eventually they could get power, travel back in time or something like that, and well, all my races have time travel. Humanity isn't the only race out there. There's 70,000 other races. Earth is only one planet. So, and God is just government authorized delusion. Authorized used to start with no. So they thought they could do all this, and they thought they could all do all that. They thought they could hold down technology or stop technology. And they tried to do it with my other races first. And then they came to Earth and wanted to do it with Earth too. Anyway, they planned to kill every life form, or every life form on Earth at least, to stop everyone from knowing any of this. So, anyway, very, very, very annoying. But anyway, but I'm Lucifer Star. Well, realistically, they knew how much they had lied, and they knew that something was going to be done about them. They were scared. Instead of being honest and truthful, they decided to lie and cheat because they had nothing. And the only way that they could get something was by stealing and killing. So, they did. And they're guilty for what they did. Anyway, they're basically just liars and killers and people that tortured other people to try and find me and kill me.